Hi, and welcome back to the History Hut. I'm Jim, this is Dr. K, and we're talking about immigration to Canada today. So the West is now ready to settle, if you've been following along. Our viewers at home.
As we hope you have. Yeah.
So everything's sort of in place. We just need settlers.
Yeah, we just
need
some immigrants.
How quickly does the West fill up?
Well, I mean, you know, we've got the treaty signed. We saw that in the 1870s. We've got the 1885 Northwest Rebellion all sorted. We've got the railway in. We've got, changes in our political leaders and everything. And you're right. The only thing that we really need is to get people to actually come to Canada. Just add water. Yeah, just add water. So you need to get people out. And we've already got the policy, right? We've got the national policy. We've got part of that. All going to get people out. And, of course, to get them farming. We don't just want anybody.
Yeah,
we want people that can actually farm. And so this actually becomes the greatest achievement, I think, of the Laurier period. It's not really going to be the great victory for MacDonald and the national policy. In fact, it comes under Wilfrid Laurier and his Minister of the Interior, Clifford Sifton, Laurier, of course, 1896 to 1911. But you have to remember as well, when we're talking about immigration to the West, that the West isn't actually empty, that there's lots and lots of native people there, and there's lots and lots of Métis, and there's even a couple of hundred Canadian settlers scattered here, there, and everywhere. But really, MacDonald's aim had been to bring the whole country together, make them feel Canadian, take charge of the West, and that just hadn't happened so far. And partly it's because of the worldwide depression. I mean, people don't tend to move about too much when they've got no money. I mean, it's not the poorest of people that emigrate to places, because you still need a bit of cash, right? You still need a bit of the readies with you, so that's not going to happen. So where we should focus on, I think, for the West is places like Edmonton. So about the 1870s, so that's what I've heard. About the 1870s, Edmonton had a population of under 150 people. Huh. And about 30 cultivated acres of land. St. Albert had a much higher population of about 5,000, because remember, that's where the Métis population is settled. And Calgary, in the great battle of the two cities, Calgary only had a population of about 75. So Edmonton was big time compared to Calgary in that period. Of course, by the time the railway gets to Calgary, it's got a whole 400 people. So it's got quite a bit more. So if you were looking at someplace like Edmonton, we'll just look at Edmonton just because it's the capital and everything of Alberta. So Edmonton by 1875 had a steamboat. It still has one today. It's just that it doesn't really run up and down the river very much. What's it called? The Edmonton Queen? So that hasn't been successful. By 1877, it had a telegraph, and by 1879, it had a post office. And of course, our friend Frank Oliver would open the Edmonton Bulletin. So you've got the newspaper as well. If you were to look to the south towards Calgary, the main occupation near Calgary was ranching, and there's actually quite a bit of French and English influences down there. Oh, they aren't all cowboys then. They're all hoity-toity in the past. So, people living in country homes and going on fox hunts and stuff.
Yes.
Oh, yes. You might have to use, maybe not a fox, a coyote or something. but taking tea in the afternoon, dressing up for the ball at night. So it's quite a different kind of place. And towns like Trochu, that was a place where some of the French aristocracy settled. So again, it was all dress up and tea and polo and stuff like that. So really not what we consider to be the West, because we kind of think of our West as the same as the American West, or all cowboys and Indians and everybody's having fun or doing really terrible things to each other. And instead of that, we've got polo players and high tea, cucumber sandwiches and the like, with the crust cut off. So you had people like Cochrane, of course. There's a town now called Cochrane, Senator Cochrane, who bred cattle. The Galts, who were from railway money, they moved down to the Lethbridge area. And you have a club that's still here in Calgary, or it's not, I'm not in Calgary, so I shouldn't say here in Calgary. The Ranchmen's Club in Calgary, that was opened. And English aristocrats would, thinking about the Canadian West, thought of it as the last frontier. Well, of course, they're part of the empire. They've got all sorts of other frontiers that they've already been to. You know, they've already been on the great tiger shoots in India, and they've been all over the place. And so now they're like, there's just this one left. We've got the last best West. You know, we can go there. So you have people like Lord Lorne, who's the Governor General and son-in-law of Queen Victoria, coming out west and naming the province Alberta, and also naming the area that a lot of people go skiing in, Lake Louise, after his wife, Princess Louise Caroline Alberta, and we have all of those names in Alberta. So,
Right.
so you know, a lot of it's a strange kind of place. I think it would be quite exciting. So you've got, you know, the aristocracy, and you've got, you know, people out thinking it's the final frontier, not space, the final frontier. No, places
These
like
are the voyages of the
Alberta.
British Empire.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Oh, can you do that voice again? That was very good. That was very good. So it's a really strange, crazy kind of place, and that's just the kind of start of it, because there are other sorts of people that come in as well besides the aristocrats.
What other types of people do we see?
Okay, well, I'm glad you asked me that. I always am.
I had a feeling
just in case.
Where the conversation was headed.
Yeah, just in case you decided that you weren't going to ask. Another group that comes over, they're called the Remittance Men. And the NFB, National Film Board of Canada, just produced a little 5-minute thing on the Remittance Men, and you can, I believe, download it for $3.95 from the NFB site. And it's really good. It's kind of cartoon version, but it's really good. So the Remittance Men, they were the second sons. Are you a second son or are you a first son?
I believe I'm first.
You're a first, so you wouldn't know what it's like then to be a remittance man. So the second sons, you know, they're obviously in Britain. Well, if you were in the upper classes, the first son would get all the land, then the second son might, I don't know, go into the church, and the third one might go into the military. Well, these were the sons that were given allowances to leave for Canada and never come back. They're like, okay, you're such a pain in the butt. You are such a pain that it would be really good if you went away and didn't return. This is a lovely little article that I have here. It's called "Of King, Country and Severe Incompetence. The sons of Britain never faltered in their love of the motherland. It was the land they'd come to. They couldn't much abide." And so it just says, "So bad was their reputation for arrogance and ineptness that by mid-decade, no English need apply signs blossomed across the West." It's not what you're used to.
Wow.
Jokes abounded. One prairie settler swore his English neighbour sowed 3 bags of oatmeal in the field so he could grow his own porridge. Yeah. Another settler hired an English cattle herder who had a positive talent for sleeping on the job. And then a Rocky Mountain guide remembered, and this is a wee quote, "Wherever you went, you found some damn fool Englishman looking for the outer rim of beyond the beyond." He recalled 4 English ditch diggers talking to each other in Latin. The foreman thought they were plotting against the government. So just like men are totally unprepared for coming out here. A visitor from Leeds in 1906 confirmed for his countrymen the English were unpopular in Canada, that everybody preferred Swedes, Russians, Germans, and even Galicians at the Ukrainians because they worked harder. Most recruiting literature had played down Western Canada's hardships. As the Edmonton Journal summed up, "One cannot look at the hundreds of town-bred people without feeling their presence is a mistake here." So, so again, it's this really odd combination of people. So it says, "Remittance men, the ne'er-do-well sons of the rich and titled, became the symbols of English failure in the West." And there's a lot of them go to BC as well. So their cocksure attitude and their veneration of all things English didn't help. They talk of the flag and the old country with an effusive affection that startles the mere Englishman, said a London journalist who was travelling amongst them. Another farmer Frank Gilbert Rowe, knew a remittance man named Buck who'd been such a consummate drunk in a layabout in Lincolnshire that his family had shipped him to Alberta with $10,000 cash plus a quarterly stipend of $250. Buck bought a ranch, diddled it away until his foreman took over and ended up as a cook on his erstwhile property. So just totally hopeless. And then it's kind of interesting because Canada tightened its immigration laws after 1906, and You could deport people that couldn't kind of pay their own way. It would become a burden on the public purse. And the Yorkshire Post complained that, that Canada had the right to bar undesirable aliens, but how dare it bar people from the country which bears the naval expense of the empire. So yeah, I'm kind of mad about it too. But it goes on to say that many of them ended up becoming really good farmers, and probably the way that they were treated gave them a bit of humility when dealing with actual Canadians or with anybody that was already out there. So the Remittance Men just add to this general, who's here? Everybody's here. And when Laurier took power in 1896, this all changes, because he has a kind of definite policy of who should come out and when and how. So that strange mix of people gradually becomes swamped with the, as they would say, the right sort of man for the Canadian West, men, of course, who were dedicated to farming. So Remittance Men are part of the whole crazy West, early West.
Sounds like an interesting time.
Yeah, can I just add in? There's again, I'm not going to show this because it never works. It always comes up like a white piece of paper. So I'll just read from it. This is from the Edmonton Bulletin, and it's just a little, kind of, hey, why don't you come to the West sort of thing, but it's focused on women. And it says, it's my favorite, urgent, thousands of nice girls are wanted in the Canadian West. And then it goes on to say, over 20,000 men are sighing for what they cannot get, wives.
Oh my God.
Shame. And then it's in huge letters. It says, do not hesitate, come at once. If you cannot come, send your sisters. And then the absolute
just sounds desperate.
Beautiful.
It gets worse?
Oh God, yeah. So great is the demand that anything in a skirt stands a chance.
Oh my.
So there you go. No reasonable offer refused. They're all shy but willing. All prizes, no blanks. Hurry up now, girls, and don't miss this chance. Some of you will never get another. So
wow.
There you go.
The Canadian West, where standards don't exist.
That's right. And then, of course, when you look at the photographs of people that are out there, everybody looks so, kind of dour and bad-tempered. But they're not really. That's just a function of how long it takes the photograph to actually take. So, but still, there's a couple of wicked witches of the West in some of those old photos. So it's so there you go. Absolutely desperate for women to come to the West.
Well, what was holding other people back from coming out?
No women. No.
Yeah, well, apart from the obvious.
Yes, the absolutely obvious. The big question is, why is there no rush to settle the Canadian West? After all, you're practically just giving land away. Why would people not want to come there? And one economic history book written by Ken Norrie and Doug Oram talks about the Canadian economy, Canadian economic history, calls this the barriers to settlement. And I'll just kind of go through a few of them.
Sure.
Thank you. So the first one, of course, is the fear of an Indian rising. People are just kind of like, oh, what if we go there and we're not safe? The second one is, of course, the lack of rail lines. You don't get the first one till 1885, and then you have three by the early 1900s. So that's one of the early barriers. The third one is that there were really high wheat prices in the 1880s, and this touched off not a boom in Canada, but a boom in Dakota. So it's called the Dakota boom. And of course, that's, south of us, right? Kind of Red River area. And so people that wanted to farm flocked there. And the Canadian government really just had to wait until the boom had stopped booming. So the Canadian government had to wait until the boom played itself out. The fourth thing is that there was a perception that the best land was in the American West. Those Americans, eh? So from 1870 to 1900, while various governments from Macdonald to Laurier are trying to get people to come to the Canadian West, from 1870 to 1900, about 120,000 Canadians chose the American West over the Canadian West. They're like, well, they've already got town sites and things established, and it's easier to farm the lower down you are. So there's actually an out-migration. So you're trying to get people in, and people that are already kind of thinking of going or already there are like, oh, it's way too hard here. We're going down to America. So, and if you see some of the pictures from this period, it's just like you're farming rocks. There's some absolutely amazing pictures from the 1880s. And you see these, 2 or 3 farmers, and they're going through a field, and it's just rocks like this size, just everywhere. In fact, somebody told me that there's a farmer in Saskatchewan that all the rocks he's ever dug up, he's turned them into a little Great Wall of China somewhere in Saskatchewan. It's just such like rock farming. The other thing is that the cultivation techniques that you really needed hadn't been successfully adapted to the Canadian West. And remember, we talked a little bit when we were talking about the Indian agents and the farm agents coming out to help Native people make the transition to farming. They don't even know what they're doing. Well, they don't even have like the right crop at this point. So they're actually working on an early ripening variety of wheat. It's called Marquis wheat, and it's not. It's kind of They have it by 1905, but it's not generally available to the public to 1910. So you have to kind of wait, and it's frost-free. Gives you the most frost-free days. They also didn't know much about dryland farming. In other words, agriculture without irrigation in areas that don't get much rain. And so that you would have to learn to select the plants that would, that didn't need a lot of moisture, and you needed to build reservoirs. You needed to leave land in fallow. So because of that, the risk of failure is higher. So why would people risk that? You've come to a new country. You've done that to improve your whole family, the lives of your family. Why would you go to the riskiest possible area? The startup costs, of course, are higher as well. So that kind of explains why people go into America. And people worried just generally about the risk of drought, and of course about the risk of frost, and they're not used to being farming in that part of the country, so it's really difficult. So they do what economists say people do. They maximize their utility. They want to do well, and if that meant going to the American West, then that's what they did.
Well,
yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
Well, let's immigrate to part 2 of this episode, and we'll further discuss this topic.
Will we be Ukrainian immigrants, or should we? Because they're the most successful, so perhaps we could do
absolutely
that.
Then.
Okay, we will.